Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council. It's our regular session meeting. It is February 3rd, 6 o'clock, and Councilmember Ronnie Martin has our prayer and our pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you in prayer. We're very mindful and thankful all at the same time. We're thankful for all the many blessings you give us and the things that we enjoy on a daily basis, all the privileges we have and the joy we celebrate. At the same time, Father, we're mindful of those that are hurting and are in pain or suffering from loss. We ask a special prayer over our Vice Mayor, Madeline Scales Harris. We ask that you be with those that serve diligently in our city every day. We ask that you be with those leaders at this table to help us make good decisions. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. We're going to move to our consent agenda. Item 6 is going to be pulled off and put, I guess that'll go to item 24. We'll move to, we have our minutes from the January 12th meeting. Is there any additions or deletions to the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Is that for the minutes or the consent agenda?
I'm sorry. We need to, let's do the minutes and then we'll go back to the consent agenda. I'm sorry. This is for the minutes.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Can I get a motion for the consent agenda absent number 6?
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move to old business. You have several land use matters. Ordinance 21 OZ 47. We did have a typo in the agenda. This is not for the plan of services and annexation. This is just for zoning for property along Joe B. Jackson. This is second and final reading.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Also, number 10, it's ordinance 21 OZ 48, but this is not plan of services and annexation. This is just zoning for property along New Salem Highway, and this is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown?
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Ordinance 21 OZ 44, amending West Lawn PUD zoning along Veterans Parkway. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Ordinance 21 OZ 45. This is rezoning along Bridge Avenue, and this is second and final reading.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown?
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to new business, and on resolution you have 22R04. This is United Telephone Company Cable TV franchise fees. Mr. Bozeman.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. United Telephone Company has applied for an amendment to its state-issued cable and video franchise certificate to provide traditional cable TV services to portions of the city. State statute requires a municipality to adopt a resolution stating that those companies obtaining a state certificate include in the definition of gross revenue, among other items, franchise fees as part of the quarterly franchise fee payments to the city. This is the same resolution that the City Council passed for AT&T when they applied for a state certificate years ago. It's recommended approval of this resolution. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Bozeman?
No questions. Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to, thank you, Mr. Bozeman. We'll move to land use matters. You have a plan of services, annexation, and zoning for property located along Florence Road. Mr. Blomley.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of council. First public hearing tonight is for an annexation and plan of services along Florence Road. There's a companion zoning request, but this is just for the annexation and plan of services. You'll see on the map before us there is a parcel colored in orange that's approximately 19 acres. It is the future location of the intersection of the future Cherry Lane extension and Florence Road. This property has been requested for annexation into the city of Murfreesboro. Also, there are 2 segments of right-of-way that are included in the annexation study and plan of services. There's this pink area down here. We thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and fill in that gap of right-of-way. Also, there's a very narrow strip that we acquired, narrow strip of Florence Road right-of-way right there that we own, but we need to go ahead and annex into the city limits to make it uniformly in the city limits. The area in pink to the south, we received consent from the county road board to annex that segment of their right-of-way. The plan of services is in your agenda materials. It indicates that we'll be able to provide services relatively easily to the subject property. There's 1 single-family home on the property, but it's close along Florence Road, and services can be provided to it upon annexation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and then voted to recommend approval.
All right, any questions for Mr. Blomley? I was waiting for you to say something about Auburn being number 1.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was waiting for you to say something about Auburn being number 1, Mr. Mayor.
They did it with our coach, though.
Yeah. Hey, just, take note that you had to go to Tennessee to get a coach to be able to be number 1, so.
Ouch.
Oh, man. All right, you're getting witty, Mr. Blumley. All right, we'll move to the public hearing for the plan of services and the annexation. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, if you'll come to the podium, you have 3 minutes as an individual, 5 minutes as a group. And again, this is for the plan of services and the annexation. If you'll keep all comments directed to the council, we'll get those answered at the end of the public hearing. All right, we'll open the public hearing on the plan of services and annexation. All right, seeing none or no comments, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider for Resolution 21R PS 41 for the plan of services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Abstain.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll now move to Resolution 21R A41, and this is for the annexation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Abstain.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move to the zoning for the 19 acres. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. The subject property is the same property we just considered for annexation. Mr. David Alcorn has the property under contract and is seeking to have it zoned RS6 and CF simultaneous with annexation. The frontage along Florence Road, which would be the intersection of the Cherry Lane extension and Florence Road, and there's commercial zoning across Florence Road, so he's looking to create a four-sided intersection of commercial at that location. Florence Road is considered a minor arterial, and this Cherry Lane extension will be a major arterial once it's completed. So the frontage is proposed to be commercial fringe. The bulk of the property along on the eastern side of the property in yellow is proposed to be RS6, single-family residential, minimum lot sizes of 6,000 square feet. Mr. Alcorn has been working with our legal department on a road construction agreement for this property, and I believe on second and final reading, Mr. Sam Huddleston will be bringing to the council that road construction agreement. Mr. Alcorn is committing to construct the Cherry Lane extension through his property. I believe two lanes of that roadway, so dedicating the right-of-way for the entire roadway and then constructing 2 lanes of it with his development. As part of that road construction agreement, he is committing to certain restrictions on his property that will be actually a part of the road construction agreement that the city will be a party to. And as a good faith effort to show what he is proposing to do, I've laid at your desks some proposed restrictions that he would include on the development of his property. but both on the commercial and the residential portion of his development. The zoning, of course, is not a conditional zoning, but these conditions would become, or these restrictions would become part of that agreement, and he would be bound to those restrictions. The subject property is bounded on its north side by the Florence Green subdivision, which is zoned RS10. On the south side by the Green Acres and Cherrywood Estates subdivisions, which are zoned RS10 and RS12. Directly across Florence Road, as I mentioned, is undeveloped commercial fringe. And then also to the west across Florence Road is the developing Windwoods subdivision, that is the PRD by Valor Drive and Virtue Avenue, which are under construction right now. The Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan calls for auto urban general residential for this property. The RS6 zone is consistent with the auto urban general residential classification. The commercial fringe, however, is not. However, staff is supportive of the commercial fringe as it is an intersection of two arterial roads, and it's generally good planning practice to include commercial nodes where there are two arterial roads that come together. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and then voted to recommend approval to the City Council. We'll need to conduct a public hearing on this zoning request tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. David Alcorn is here representing Alcorn Properties, as is his civil engineer, Mr. Nathan Melson. This is bulk zoning. It's not a planned development, but for your information, he has included a proposed subdivision layout which shows approximately 51 single-family lots that would be a part of this development if the zoning is approved.
Any questions for Mr. Blomley or the applicant? All right. Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing for this zoning request for 19 acres. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider on first reading ordinance 21 OZ 41.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Abstain.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move to item 15. This is a plan of services annexation and zoning for property along New Salem Highway. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next zoning request, or our next public hearing is for an annexation and plan of services for the area colored in green on the map in front of you. This property, approximately 25 acres, is located along the east side of New Salem Highway. It's directly adjacent to the city limits on both its east, west, and north sides. The property around it to the north and to the east is the developing Salem Landing subdivision. I think this is kind of an area of open space that's not part of the subdivision, but you can see the streets here that are roughed into our GIS. That plat has since actually been recorded since this map was drafted. Salem Landing single-family subdivision is directly adjacent to the property, and to the south is the Clear Ridge subdivision in the unincorporated county. But the property is contiguous with the existing city limits. It's within the city's urban growth boundary. The plan of services has been included in the agenda materials. Worthy of note is that there is a single-family home all the way at the rear of the property. And as you can tell by the scale on this map, that's approximately 1,900 to 2,000 feet off of New Salem Highway. There's a narrow drive that comes in from New Salem Highway to access that existing single-family home. So we have, in the plan of services, indicated that in its present condition, that existing home will receive fire protection and emergency responder services that are not equal to what we would typically provide, but upon development, because of access and fire hydrant, lack of an available fire hydrant, But upon development, we will be able to fully serve that property with our full complement of fire services. But upon annexation, that home will not be able to be served with our full complement of fire and emergency services, but it will still be able to receive some level of those services. Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and then voted to recommend its approval. With the exception of our ability to provide services to that house, the city limits, as I mentioned, are directly adjacent to the property, and it will be relatively easy to extend services to that property, especially upon development. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
All right, we'll need to open the public hearing for this plan of services and annexation. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for resolution or for passage resolution 21R PS 42, and this is for the plan of services.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll now consider for resolution or for passage resolution 21R A 42, and this is for the annexation.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we now have, we'll need to conduct a public hearing for the zoning request. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor. The zoning request is actually fairly similar to the one that you just considered. This 25 acres is proposed to have commercial highway up along the frontage in the orangish red color, and the bulk of the property is proposed to be zoned RS8, single-family residential with minimum lot sizes of 8,000 square feet. I described the location earlier, but the existing zoning in the area is RS6, as I mentioned. That's the Salem Landing subdivision that's under development right now. There's commercial highway already along the frontage of New Salem Highway directly to the north. And this RS15 and OG area, I think, has really very little development potential because of some environmental constraints. Across New Salem Highway to the west, zoned RS10, is the Carlton Landing subdivision that's currently under development as well. The Clear Ridge subdivision, which is in the unincorporated county, is located directly to the south. So the zoning request is generally consistent with the city zoning that's in the area. The RS8 zone was recently amended to require the minimum exterior material requirements for the reduction in fire damage. And so each facade is required to be a minimum of 75% brick, stone, or cementitious siding. The Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommended that the property develop with a suburban residential land use character, which is generally RS10, 12, and 15. The density that RS8 permits is generally right on the cusp of auto-urban and suburban residential. So if it's not consistent, it's not too far off of that suburban residential land use character. However, the applicant has submitted a conceptual plan showing approximately 73 lots on the proposed RS8, which would be about 3.3 dwelling units per acre, which actually does fall within that suburban residential land use character. The frontage along New Salem Highway as commercial highway is not consistent with that suburban residential land use character, but as I mentioned, it is consistent with the commercial highway zoning further to the north. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and voted to recommend its approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have before or after the public hearing.
Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, seeing none, we'll need to open the public hearing for this zoning request for 25 acres. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider on first reading ordinance 21 OZ 42.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Blomley.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to items for all motion. We have Barge Design Solutions Approach Management Work Authorization Amendment to Airport. And Mr. Alcorn, y'all are welcome to stay, but you're not going to hurt our feelings if y'all want to get up and take off. All right. Greg.
Yeah, Mayor, I don't see Chad here, so I'll go ahead and take this. This is a work authorization for Barge Design, who is the engineer for our airport, to work with Tennessee Avionics Division and the FAA to do some engineering work that needs to be done regarding the approaches to the runway at our airport. So we would request council approve that expenditure. If you have any questions, I'll give it a shot.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to item 17. This is Murfreesboro Blue Links cost proposal. This is from Community Development. Ms. Quinn.
Hi, good evening. We have a proposal before you for community development with our CDBG funds with Blue Links, our consultant, for $66,125 to assist us with some of our planning and activity programming, and just to help us out this year. So it's with our regular admin funding. On motion?
Any questions?
I do have a question. Is this
Sure.
a new contract or is
Yes.
this a renewal?
Well, yes. They finished their other one.
So we had them in prior years? provide similar
Well, we had
service?
them just this past year for our con plan.
Okay. And so what they're providing, who has provided those services in the past?
No, well, our prior one, our prior director did. John did, just our plan.
Okay.
They did our new plan, and they did a little bit of services with, they did a new analysis of impediments. I think you might have come to that, Ronnie, in October?
Mm-hmm.
You did?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. On October 28th at the airport?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. That was something we needed updated like every 10 years or so.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move to Brinkley Road Phase 1 project, award of construction contract.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the City Council. Have for you a construction agreement with Bell and Associates for the construction of the Phase 1 of the Brinkley Road improvements. The project replaces and widens the bridge over Overall Creek to 3 lanes with a multi-use path and a sidewalk along both sides. It's also, the limits are extended north of Timber Creek and south of Blaze Drive, providing turn lanes to both of those side streets. We advertised a contract when we received 3 bids on December 16th of 2021. The lowest responsible bid in the amount of $3,839,997 was submitted by Bell. The engineer estimate was about $400,000 lower than that, and we attribute the increase in the bid due to the higher labor and material cost in the area. With that, we recommend approval of the contract with Bell, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Griffith, this is the bridge that over the years we've all had discussions about the kids that are walking to Blackman from Berkshire and some of those areas.
Yes.
This is that bridge, isn't it?
It is, and I didn't mention it, but we also provided, as a result of the public meeting, we provided a walkway under the bridge as well for those residents to be able to cross the road without traffic there.
So moved.
Second. Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Griffith.
You.
Hey, Mr. Browning, can we push that out as a release or something? Because I know we've got a lot of the people on the west side of town who've asked about this project, and that'll help us get the word out. Thank you. We have construction testing for Brinkley Road Improvements Project Phase 1. Mr. Griffith.
Yes,
Sorry, I'm sorry, I skipped contract for construction administration first for the Brinkley Road Improvement Project.
Sure. This is for the administrative construction services for the project, for the Brinkley Road project. ELI did the design for the bridge and has submitted us an estimate for $129,880 to provide administrative services for us on this project. We recommend approval of this contract.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, now we'll move to construction testing for the Brinkley Road Improvement Project Phase 1.
Yes, same project, Brinkley Road Phase 1. This is for the material testing, primarily the concrete testing for the bridge. TTL has agreed to perform these services with an estimated amount of $23,000. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. All right, we'll move to Tyler Technology Brazos e-citation subscription contract. Chief Bowen.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. For your consideration this evening is a request to contract with Tyler Technology for Brazos e-citation software. MPD began the use of e-citations in 2008, but had to discontinue use after upgrades were performed on the computer-aided dispatch system, record system, and court system in 2017 and 2018. Since that time, we were able to find a product through Tyler and Brazos that gives us a solid interface into the city court system and the state Titan accident system. We'll be able to use existing devices for the citations, and we may have to make some printer upgrades for older patrol units. The initial expenses of $137,000 will be funded from the Police and Court e-citation fund, and ongoing expenditures of about $105,000 will be funded by the operating budget. For this time, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Chief?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to item 22. This is the purchase of data backup equipment from Insight Public Sector. Chief.
All right, for your consideration is a request to purchase a replacement backup appliance from Insight Public Sector for securing public safety data. The current device was purchased in 2016 and it had a 3-year service agreement. The service agreement was renewed in 2019. Now the device has reached the end of life service and we have to replace the physical equipment. The vendor will be providing a 3-year agreement along with providing us a credit towards the replacement of our current physical equipment. We utilize multiple devices for security and recovery of our system in case of failures. This purchase will be from the Omnia Purchasing Cooperative, and the physical hardware cost of $139,986 will be funded with FY21 CIP funds, and service costs of $14,846 will be funded from the FY22 budget. This time, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chief?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item 23. This is the award of mechanical electrical services contract. Mr. Gore.
Mayor, council, thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. This first item is a request for approval for the Water Resource Recovery Facility Biosolids Polymer System Replacement. The slide before you kind of shows that the polymer is introduced into the dewatering press, which ultimately goes to the truck that drops the biosolids off at Middle Point Landfill. This particular project is being in conjunction with, we actually bid out the mechanical electrical services contract, and this is the first task order of that services contract to replace the polymer system. We've done this, our third renewal of the mechanical services electrical contract, been a huge success. We're able to issue task orders using supplemental labor pricing and supplemental equipment pricing when we have these larger mechanical or electrical needs. So what we're asking for, these are just a couple of pictures. There was only one bid. It was John Bouchard and Sons, and the task order price is $1,285,723.30. You can see we had some fixed allowances and guaranteed price items, so their actual labor bid is around $367,322. So we would request your approval for this contract and task order.
Any questions for Mr. Gore?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll need to consider item 6 from the consent agenda. This is the MPDES permit legal assistance. Mr. Gore.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Again, thank you. So this task order is request to engage King and Spalding. They're an attorney law firm out of Atlanta, and it's to assist, advise, and serve as counsel in connection with the Murfreesboro's request to expand our national pollutant discharge elimination system permit. That's NPDES. I did want to take the opportunity to just kind of bring you all up to speed with kind of maybe the last year's worth of progress progress back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. We've kind of been going to volleying back and forth with TDEC, but I think it's important enough, obviously, for the future of our sewer system and the growth of our city. I just wanted to take about 5 to 10 minutes to go over with you the history of this. So back in February of 21, it came to my attention that Tennessee had a disparate or a different dissolved oxygen standard than other Region 4 states. So I've got the slide up here, and I called it, I kind of created a little sense of urgency that Tennessee communities' growth will be killed because of an unfair EPA standard applying only to Tennessee. We have on a wadeable stream, which is a small stream that you can wade. These are the kind of cities: Murfreesboro, Franklin, Smyrna, Columbia, Tullahoma, Cookeville, so on. We have to meet an instantaneous 5 part per million dissolved oxygen standard. Water reclamation facilities will not be allowed to expand into streams that don't meet that dissolved oxygen standard. Other Region 4 states, let's use North Carolina and Kentucky, they have to have a 5 part per million average of dissolved, and they can't go below 4 part per million in any instantaneous moment. Okay, so what does that look like? So this is a graph that shows dissolved oxygen on the y-axis. Time is on the x-axis. It's a period of 2019. The orange dots are really instantaneous 30-minute readings of dissolved oxygen. The black line is a moving average. You can see that there's several instances of us going below 5, and in Tennessee, that is a violation of the dissolved oxygen standard. It would not be a violation of dissolved oxygen standard in other states because the average, or the black line, does not go below 5. The other states would have a violation if you went below 4 on any instantaneous period. So you can see that if we were in North Carolina or Kentucky, we would not have any violation to their water quality standards with regards to dissolved oxygen. In Tennessee, we had violations because we went instantaneously below that 5 part per million threshold. So we asked TDEC to fix it, and they said, oh no, EPA has to approve it. So we got an email from the EPA that says, oh, TDEC has the ability to change it. So we kind of got into this, and so we're still kind of there a little bit, and that's why we're asking for King and Spalding to come in and maybe help untangle some of this. I also wanted to talk about the impaired and threatened waters list. This dissolved oxygen standard ties into an impaired waters list that the state puts out every 2 years. So in December, we got a draft list of impaired and threatened waters. The red section here on the map, we got, for the first time, this segment was not on the impaired list. It was unimpaired and, quote, healthy. But now we've got it on the impaired list because it's impaired for dissolved oxygen. That graph I just showed you, it went below 5. Segment 2000, this is between Sinking Creek and just before State Route 840. It's a small section. They came out and said, we're impaired for nutrients, dissolved oxygen, and sedimentation. And I bring that TMI score, that's the Tennessee Macroinvertebrate Score, that's the bugs. If we're greater than 32, they tell us that we meet the standard as far as biological health. So we're meeting the standard of biological health, but we have this dissolved oxygen standard now that they're equating the two together. Section 1000, hey, it got taken, it was actually on the impaired list in the 2 years in 2020 for E. coli. It's now off the list. So segment 1000, 840 all the way to the lake, no listing of impairment. It's a good thing. So we contacted TDEC and said, this is unacceptable. We are not going to be able to move forward with our MPDS permit application when you guys are making new, adding dissolved oxygen as an impairment status, and we're telling you that standard is flawed, right? It's not consistent with other states. And our biology is showing that we have great biology, even though we dip occasionally below the dissolved oxygen standard. So they came back and wrote us a great letter. First time they've given us any daylight at all. They didn't change segment 3000 or 1000, but what they did for segment 2000 is they said they removed nutrient and sedimentation impairment. Big deal. But they kept dissolved oxygen on there. They've come back and said, the standard is what the standard is. You don't meet it. We have to show it as an impairment. But we're willing to meet with you and talk through this and see if there's a path forward. So this is kind of the path forward. We're meeting with them Monday, February 7th, 11 o'clock. We turned in our permit expansion application in March 1st of 2021. We've given them several reports over the past year. Won't go into it. One of them was the comparison of our state standard compared to all the other Region 4 state standards on dissolved oxygen. We're looking at historical review of significant amount of data on the West Fork with regards to dissolved oxygen. And we've given them since 2014 our biological results, which have shown the West Fork to have outstanding biological health. What are we saying? We're saying the West Fork Stones River is an exception, that your across-the-board standards shouldn't apply, right? We have site-specific criteria and data that support you giving us an exception to the general rule. So, and we've got EPA guidelines that say they foresaw this and that there are the channels and the abilities to give exceptions to the rule. And we want to know how TDEC can adopt those. If our state rules don't match up with the EPA rules, how do we do that? Well, King and Spalding. It's a resource. They're coming in. We're going to try to rewrite and help get there, or not. But if we don't get there, there's other channels, we go to other means and methods. But at the end of the day, the hope is that we can work through this and we get our MPDS permit expanded. We can expand our plant at that point, and Murfreesboro is good until I'm gone from this world with regards to the sewer system. So that's kind of why we're asking for King and Spalding's help. Hopefully that was not too, that was informative, and I'm available for questions if you have any.
I have one, Darren. Do you know if, one, I mean, I have followed this just because I'm interested, so I appreciate the effort that you've invested. I know lots of people have invested effort, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
General question, we have dipped below that 5 number.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if other cities around have dipped below that 5 number? I mean, is there data from the state that says, hey, Murfreesboro's on the naughty list, or Murfreesboro and 25 other places are on the naughty list?
Yeah. So, how detailed of a response do I give you, Ronnie? So in 2005, TDEC published a report. They had gone across the state and looked at the dissolved oxygen water quality criteria, several water quality criteria, of which dissolved oxygen was a component. And we are in an ecoregion 71I. It's the Inner Nashville Basin. TDEC's report came out explicitly and said in 2005, based on their sampling, that streams inside of this Inner Nashville Basin supported aquatic life with occasional excursions to the dissolved oxygen standard of 5. So yes, they have seen it in this particular basin, and I can give you a map if you want it. And they actually came back and said, even though it dipped, we supported aquatic life, the biological health standards. My question to TDEC is, why didn't EPA change this back in 2005? And has anybody pressed the issue? And I think, quite honestly, we're the first ones to come up and have pressed the issue. And so, quite honestly, a large part of my job is assembling this team and going back and recreating the historical record that's already there. There's data that's there that supports this request. It's just you've got a whole new generation within TDEC. They haven't read this stuff. I mean, who goes back and reads 15, 20-year-old reports, other than lawyers? And they're just, what else do they got to do? So, that's, I mean, come on. Sorry, I love lawyers, especially ones that help me get out of a jam. That's right. That's right. Yeah, Adam's doing a great job. He's helping out immensely. So. That's yes. So to answer, I don't know if that was too long-winded, but that's
great. I'll get you out of here.
Yeah. Well, I could give you that report. It's very frustrating when you find reports that say exactly what you're proving from 15 years ago, and you're still dealing with the same issue.
And I'm assuming that K&S has had some positive, and we've got a history that they have.
Yes, we worked with them. They were the council that helped us get through the Corps of Engineer issue and the water supply, where we got credit for putting water back into J. Percy Priest.
Right.
They were instrumental in that. So these are the same lawyers. It's Lewis Jones and John Fortuna, same guys that helped us with the Corps. So they've demonstrated the ability to solve problems.
And I think it's safe saying, going back to that ruling that they helped with, we felt at that time that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for
right
that group. Sometimes
you just have to the water and sewer directors of the world just fall short, or we fall. Sometimes our we just don't demand the acknowledgement of certain higher ups.
Darren and I met with Greg Young, the deputy director of TDEC, on this specific issue a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And I think that they were receptive, but they were falling back to what's on the book. So I think this is a good step. I mean, in this case, if municipalities who are around, Nashville and some of those municipalities don't have to deal with this because they have the Cumberland River,
right,
and they've got large water sources.
Right.
Small towns or places like Murfreesboro who don't have a large stream river, then you're having to work through these issues on smaller streams. So I think it's a good start.
Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, and Memphis don't have to deal with this. And so when you've got those big behemoths that are fine and aren't squawking about it, you know, Murfreesboro, we've gotten to the size and obviously the boom town level that I think TDEC has to take it serious at this point.
Yep. Great information as always, Darren.
Thank you.
Move to approve the contract.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
You have 2 beer permits in front of you. Ms. Brown.
We have an ownership change for a nightclub at 527 West Main Street and a new location for a restaurant at 215 North Church Street. Both applicants have met the requirements for beer permit, and staff recommends approval pending the final building and codes inspection.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. There's no board and commission appointments. Any statements that need to be paid?
No.
Okay. Any other business from staff?
We normally would meet next Wednesday, but we're not going to do that this week. So we will meet the Wednesday that follows for workshop. And then we'll take a look at the schedule after that for potential council meeting the last week of February.
So we're not meeting next Thursday?
No, we're not meeting next Thursday. Well, I don't know. We haven't received anything yet. It looks like it's pressing for next Thursday, so we may not meet next Thursday.
So the next
Nothing's
meeting-
been brought
Next
forward.
meeting's February 16th.
16th at Wednesday, of course, regular time for workshop
At the airport, right?
at the airport, right? And then we probably will meet on the 24th, and then on the 3rd, we won't meet because, and I'll send out an invitation that Bill has forwarded to me. The school boards, city and county, are meeting with the legislative delegation on the 3rd that evening.
Okay.
And some changes going on with the legislature as far as school funding. So it's pretty important that they get the input and we hear what they have to say. So that'll be on the 3rd. We won't meet. So that'll be available for council to go to that meeting.
Any other business from council? Just a reminder, next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock at the Murfreesboro Airport, you have the Central Tennessee Solid Waste Authority is reopening their meeting to hear additional information for the new landfill expansion. All right. Everybody have a good week. And we'll stand adjourned.